UConn will remain undefeated against Tennessee this weekend.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball, your number one sports podcast, free on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I'm here with Golden State Valkyries analyst Sophia Jones. I'm Kalia Butler, the sideline reporter for the Chicago Sky, and today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Well, first of all, happy Friday, everyone. The basketball gods are being very kind to us because as we head into the weekend, there are so many good games coming up. In terms of what we are chatting about today, there's some significant upsets that happened last night that we will get into, some more top 20 matchups coming up this weekend. But first, UConn preps for their non-conference battle against Tennessee. Now, this is going to be an interesting one because Tennessee just played last night. This is part of the upsets that we will get into. But there was some banter, let's say, in our last podcast about UConn and obviously their conference and some of the scheduled games. But we have to remember that this is still the reigning national championship team. They are in an easier conference, if you will, considering the point differential that they're winning by. But we have to remember that they are also coming in and beating highly ranked opponents. They beat Notre Dame as part of their non-conference kind of in-between schedule during their conference play as well. But they'll go up against number 15, Tennessee Tennessee on Sunday. Obviously, UConn has remained undefeated this season, but Tennessee now coming off a loss to an unranked opponent in the conference. What do we think this game is going to look like?
I think UConn, they've just been so dominant. I would expect them to continue rolling, but despite how new these groups are, it's kind of easy to forget that this is actually one of the most historic rivalries in women's basketball, period. Thinking back to the days when Pat Summitt was going and coaching up against Gino Auriemma, the Candace Parker days, all of it. So a lot of history in this matchup. And when you consider that in the rivalry implications, sometimes teams can play a little bit out of character. And I think for Tennessee, they are a team that likes to play extremely up-tempo, full court defense the entire game. But it's that kind of energy that they really use as fuel. And then you add in the factor of a rivalry. So things could get mixed up a little bit, but with the way that UConn is playing so well, they're the only unbeaten team this season in the AP poll. It doesn't look like they are going to stop rolling any point soon. I would question the availability of Blanca Quiñones. She comes off the bench and very, very valuable piece for them, just adding to that depth, especially with Tennessee probably going to try to run and make the Huskies go deep into the bench early. But Quiñones was out last game, and we're still awaiting her status for this matchup.
In the last podcast, I mentioned how this UConn bench can go up against any Big East team. If we're thinking about some depth that they may or may not need, this is going to be a true test of that, going up against a ranked opponent. This is probably going to be their last real test of the season before they get into March Madness and tournament play. But this should make for an exciting one. I think another question is wanting AZ Fudd to be on in this game too. Obviously had a little bit of a shooting slump last game. Questionable if there is any injury or any sickness that may be happening, but hoping that she has gotten enough rest to prepare for Sunday.
Yeah, and UConn's backcourt players are going to play a major role. I mentioned that full court pressure Tennessee loves to apply. So you're going to need to have ball handlers that can maintain possession just securely throughout the course of this game and handle that pressure, bring it up, and establish and assert the pace that UConn likes to play with.
In terms of some SEC play, number 24 Alabama will be going up against number 6 LSU. This game will be played in Louisiana, Baton Rouge. LSU has looked really strong since they went through that slump a little bit of losing to Kentucky, losing to Vanderbilt. And somebody that has probably impressed me most is Sophia Johnson. I think these last couple of games that they've had have been her best string of games so far this season. We kind of spoke about it earlier when they began their conference play of really needing her to kind of step up and be a leader in these situations. When she was held scoreless at Vanderbilt, there was obviously some question marks if she can come in and completely lead this LSU team. I think of what we have seen as of late, this is the most confident that she's been playing and just putting together a full game on honestly both sides of the ball.
Yeah, for LSU as a whole, I think those losses to start off SEC play against Kentucky and Vanderbilt were a major shock to the system because of their non-conference schedule didn't have the same caliber of opponents as the SEC. But after that initial shock, they've definitely managed to shake those off. And when you talk about Flage specifically, I think that win against Oklahoma was huge for her. She finished with 23 points, 10 rebounds, and since then has hit her stride, had 17 points last night against Arkansas in the win. But like you said, in these games where it could be tight and going down the stretch, you need someone that can help lead your team and potentially get a bucket and just be that solid presence. I'm starting to see that form of Flage round out more.
Looking at the Big Ten, number 8 Iowa, who also just got upset last night, is going up against number 2 UCLA. They are making their trip to the West Coast for this game. We've spoke about it, about how these are 2 undefeated teams in the Big Ten. Obviously, somebody is going to have to walk away with a loss in this one. Is Iowa going to be impacted by the loss that they just had to USC? Is this going to fuel the fire for them and they want to walk away from the West Coast with a win? I think this is going to be a true battle of who runs the Big Ten, and I'm really interested to see what this inside presence is going to look like, especially between a Betts and a Stuelke. But you also have such significant guard play when it comes to UCLA, as well as Iowa too. I think Chit Chat Wright has been very proficient in terms of leading their half-court sets, but UCLA might be a team that can really speed Iowa up, and that might put them in an uncomfortable position.
Yeah, UCLA, very, very physical. They are one of those teams where they just wear you down, get enough stops and enough scores in a row that all of a sudden you look up and it feels like it looks like it's a 20-point lead for the Bruins. But Iowa, they can wear down opponents too, is specifically, like you mentioned, in that half-court offense, just having some really good execution. But as much as the Hawkeyes will be looking for a little bit of a bounce-back game, I think UCLA will, strangely enough, be searching for the same thing in their return to LA after Illinois. They beat Illinois, but it was a lot closer of a matchup than we're used to seeing. And I think in that game, UCLA was a little rattled by the effort Illinois played with and the physicality. And those are the intangibles that you want to set the record straight immediately. So even though the Bruins won, I could see them, like I said, wanting to kind of regain a little bit of that identity and dominance in the Big Ten that they spent the season establishing.
And doing it at home will probably be the best effort that they can get for UCLA. Going to be an exciting one. But coming up after this, there are more top 20 games coming up this weekend, and we're going to get into some previews of them. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why GameTime has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. Pull up the GameTime app, pick up an upcoming NBA game, and have tickets locked in with just minutes. That's how simple it is. I wanted to go to a Bulls game, and it was kind of a last-minute idea for me. But Using the GameTime app, I was able to see exactly where I was going to be seated, had great pricing, and was able to go, even though I decided to go last minute. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today, and remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. Okay, some more games to look out for this upcoming weekend. Number 5, Vanderbilt going up against number 17, Ole Miss. This is going to be a neutral site matchup, actually, in Birmingham, Alabama. So that's going to take a little bit of advantages out of both of these teams being able to play on their home court. But I think for this game, I'm really looking for Vanderbilt. Obviously, their only loss that's come this season is against South Carolina. That's their largest big margin loss that they've had, obviously, their first loss in general. But you also kind of have to remember it's South Carolina. Not saying that that's an excuse in this league, but it's also reality that you might get blown out by South Carolina, just such a dominant team. But I think this is their chance to kind of prove who they are in the SEC still, with Michaela Blakes, obviously, who is their main offensive threat. But I really love seeing Aubrey Galvin being able to, as we mentioned before, take over some of those ball handling responsibilities and allow Michaela Blakes to play a little bit more off ball. I think she was moving really well in that position, and being able to switch up if she wants to just go ahead and run point herself, or if she wants to move over to that 2 position.
Yeah, that tandem has really developed and established the way that Vanderbilt plays on offense. And I think that having a little bit more off-ball levity is helping Michaela Blakes be more of a pest on defense, especially in the backcourt as well. Seeing that element of her game really start to develop more. But like you said, that loss to South Carolina was definitely a shocker. I don't think anyone was anticipating that. But in that game, I used the phrase where South Carolina took Vanderbilt's batting team right from the tip. And Vanderbilt needs to get that back, because the first 3 minutes essentially is when South Carolina won that game. And looking at this matchup against Mississippi, they're going to want to reestablish that dominance that they've been showing in the SEC from that tip. And taking care of the ball is going to be a major part. That's how South Carolina got that win. And that's where you think about Blakes and Galvin controlling the tempo. But then for Mississippi, they have Cody McMahon, who has really been a great engine for the Rebels. She is a really powerful and strong downhill penetrator. However, when she gets to the rim and in the mid-range, very soft touch. So she's a real creator, can get downhill. She's going to be one that Vanderbilt will need to make sure that their paint and interior defense doesn't allow her to get what she wants down there.
I think that's a great point. I think this might be a very physical game for Vanderbilt. I don't think they were overly responded well to that going up against South Carolina. I mean, every team is physical within the SEC. But when you're kind of talking about that interior presence too, Vanderbilt doesn't have much of a response to that. I think we saw that in that South Carolina game, where size is definitely going to be an advantage for Ole Miss in this one too, and just the physicality and defense that they have shown. They're also a very prolific rebounding team. So that's going to be a tough one when it comes to Vanderbilt Ole Miss. But a very exciting one. Another one coming up in the Big Ten is number 9, Michigan at number 13, Michigan State. Now, if there's any true Michigan fans out there, tell us how much of a rivalry this really is, in-state competition. But this is going to be a strong one for Michigan, who is obviously within the top 10, but kind of curious to see how dominant they look against this Michigan State team. They've had some really strong wins. Obviously, one of their most outstanding games was that close contest against UConn, being the only team that has really made them question if they're going to lose that game or not. And then obviously that triple threat of sophomores has been really clutch offensively.
Definitely. And even looking at the standings, Michigan is 9-1 in the Big Ten. Michigan State is 8-2. So they're right next to each other. This game could potentially lift the Spartans over the Wolverines. So a lot of seeding implications where in a lot of these super conferences, you don't want to get into these tiebreaker scenarios. You want to get stuff outright because of your record. But like you mentioned, Michigan, they've proven that they can hang with anyone in the league, but they have great pushes, but they will go down in order to make those pushes. We saw it against UConn, saw it last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. I can't remember dates right now, against Vanderbilt, where they were down the majority of the game, but they made it a really close competition. Vanderbilt ended up prevailing. So it's one of those things where you like that they can hang, you like that they can fight, but you don't want to get yourselves into that position in the first place, especially when you're looking at that we're playing at Michigan State. Again, Michigan people, let us know if this is a true rivalry and if the crowd could be a factor that the Spartans can capitalize on.
Another one to look out for is number 10 Oklahoma going up against number 4 Texas. This one will be played at Texas, and we know how efficient the Longhorns can be. They've been another team that when you're thinking of dominance within the SEC, they're obviously who comes to mind. But Oklahoma has given teams obviously a run for their money, being able to take down South Carolina. When this team is on and they are all rallied behind Aaliyah Chavez, they're very dangerous. And we understand that if she has the slightest bit of an opening, she really doesn't even have to be open. She is going to shoot the ball. She has the utmost confidence to get that thing through the hoop. And they're a very high tempo team that you have to try to mitigate their shot opportunities.
Definitely. I'm very interested at this matchup that will most likely be Aaliyah Chavez getting guarded by Rory Harmon. Rory Harmon, she's someone that regardless of the opponent picks up entire full court, shows a lot of pressure. And I think that could be something to help Aaliyah Chavez not get off as many of those quick looks that she likes so much. And the way that Oklahoma was able to beat South Carolina is a lot of fast break and over the top, owning the paint. And so for Texas, if they can slow the game down and execute their half-court offense and that no wasted movement execution, I think that will be the best way for them to get this win. That would be, again, huge because Texas has dropped their last 2 matchups against the really ranked opponents of the SEC. When you're looking at, they lost to South Carolina and LSU, coming off wins against Texas A&M and Florida. However, those are unranked teams, looked really dominant there. But now they have a chance to reestablish that they're one of the top dogs in the SEC by potentially getting a win over Oklahoma.
I think another factor that comes up is kind of, you mentioned it a little bit, but really establishing the paint presence for both these teams too. Obviously, Texas is very prolific in the paint. They're not a team that's going to put up a ton of perimeter shots, but Oklahoma, when you have Reagan Beers that is also sitting on the inside, you're another team that has that 1-2 punch of the outside and inside game. Texas likes to have that interior a little bit more. So I think that's going to play a significant part of getting rebounds. Both teams try to get out and run to an extent. Texas obviously maybe wants to slow it down a little bit more. But Oklahoma, if they can get out and just kind of have their way in these runs, it's going to be hard playing in Texas. But that's definitely going to give them the best chance at trying to get a W on the road.
And I think another way that Oklahoma thrived in that matchup against South Carolina is that South Carolina doesn't shoot high volume from 3, which is a very similar trait of Texas. So if they do the same thing where they can just sit in the paint and play on owning the interior, allow Reagan Beers to just gobble up those loose rebounds and outlet it and go, it could be a little scary for Texas. So their perimeter shooting is going to be a big piece of this game, as well as their defense, so that they're not going up against that half-court set every time.
Well, I told you all that this was going to be an exciting weekend of games, so make sure you were tuned in. It's still cold. It's not Super Bowl Sunday just yet, so you should be watching women's basketball. Coming up after this, we're going to recap some of the upsets last night that are going to maybe play a role in the games coming up this weekend.
It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff. The final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season is officially over. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. A lot of football talk, a lot of ways you can get your bets in on FanDuel, but for some other women's basketball, because it's also fun to just look at the FanDuel Sportsbook and see what Vegas is thinking. UConn is currently a minus 280 national championship favorite. Sarah Strong, the minus 2,000 favorite to win National Player of the Year. So she's pretty heavily favored. And because I love tennis and I was hoping for the Grand Slam season to start off with another Sinner Alcaraz final, but that was not true. And Alcaraz is currently a minus 335 favorite over Novak Djokovic. So an interesting one there for Carlitos. But if you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Obviously, everybody should be rooting for the Patriots, as I mentioned. I'm going to keep mentioning it until they win the Super Bowl. But recapping some of the games that happened last night, there was some more upsets and some important upsets when we're considering the games that are going on, specifically on Sunday. So number 8, Iowa was defeated by USC, who is currently unranked at this moment, 81-69. It was a significant upset in LA. Obviously, they have to go on to play UCLA on Sunday after this. But this was a significant win when we're looking at USC, who is trying to get their name back into the top 25, had some difficult losses this season. But Iowa having their first conference loss. I think I said that they were undefeated at the beginning, but having their first conference loss of the season to have to go back to play another dominant LA team. You want to gain your confidence as much as possible between now and Sunday.
Yeah, and USC, I don't think it's over dramatic to say that they might have saved their at-large bid chances with this win against Iowa. They were ranked for a while, then fell out with a couple of losses. They put together some wins recently, but nothing against ranked opponents. You turn around, though, and be a number 8 Iowa. So that's a huge resume booster. I think this was one of the most well-rounded games of the year. You have London Jones, 17 points, Jazzy Davidson, 21 points, Kenny Smith, 12 points. But Kara Dunn, 25 points and 12 rebounds. She was really doing it on all fronts as well. But USC started to put together some of these really solid matchups, really solid games.
And we're looking on the other side for Iowa. Ava Hayden had 13 points, Hannah Sulky, 10 points, Chit Chat Wright, 8 points. When we're looking at kind of who came in and try to save the day for Iowa, it was actually Journey Houston, who had 16 points. So she was leading the way for the Hawkeyes. But USC just kind of came out and hit them early. They went on a 10-2 run just to start the game. And that just really set the tone for the rest of the quarters to come.
Yeah, and Iowa, they are playing with some lower numbers. With the injury of Taylor McCabe tearing her ACL in that game against Ohio State. She suffered that injury the very first play of the game, and Iowa went on to blow out Ohio State, actually. But I made the comment that we'll see how sustainable that is, because you're losing one of your main starters, one of your best shooters, and now it's starting to come into effect a little bit, and will be interesting to see if they can recreate that same magic against UCLA.
Absolutely. Another one that happened last night, Mississippi State and Tennessee. Tennessee has to go on to face UConn on Sunday. This was another one where the underdogs kind of slipped in and caught Tennessee at the right time. It was a 77-62 loss for them, but Carissa Richardson for Mississippi State came in and had 21 points. She was 9 of 11 from the floor and scored 16 points in just the second half.
Yeah, she was huge to get this win over Tennessee, who before then was undefeated and sitting by themselves at the top of the SEC. And again, I mentioned how these standings come into play because you want to be that number one overall outright. But now things get interesting, which us as consumers of basketball love. But those middle periods are when Mississippi State specifically dominated, and you talk about Richardson specifically in those 21 points. She was 9 of 11 from field goal, so doing it at a really efficient rate.
And this is going to be really interesting, setting the tone for both Iowa, both UConn, looking at the Tennessee, looking at the big picture of this game on Sunday for both of them, that they are going up against some of the most prolific teams, with one of them out of their conference, one of them within their conference. Tennessee, it's a non-conference game for them, but after losing to an unranked opponent within their own conference, you're kind of looking towards what you're going to be seeing from March. Not that this is ruining their chances by any means, but wanting to make sure that you are on the right path, because some of these losses can turn into a string of losses, especially when you're looking to go up against the national champions. What do we expect in a game like that?
Yeah, just like you said, you don't want them to get down on themselves because Mississippi State is still a very quality opponent. They're unranked, but it's the SEC. I don't think that rankings matter all too much within that conference. Mississippi State beat Kentucky earlier this month, so they're playing with a lot of confidence, and you can't feel discouraged by that. You have to play UConn with as clear and a fresh slate as possible. Got to have that short-term amnesia, and same thing for Iowa. Can't get held up on that loss against USC, especially with a quick turnaround. There's no time to really feel sorry for yourselves. You just have to start scouting and prepping for that next opponent.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really good slate of games. We're looking at all these top 25, looking at the shifts within the AP polls, which some of them haven't been overly substantial, but obviously some teams that have snuck their way back to the top. Iowa being one of those teams still sitting in the top 10. So we will see what this weekend brings. But thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On Women's Basketball. It's been a fun week with you, and we will see